Welcome back to the Startup of Human Potential.
I'm Clifton,
And I'm Victoria.
and together we're Faces of the Future. Faces of the Future is a startup studio with a personal development platform focused on consciousness, connection, innovation, and well being. And today we have an incredible guest with us, Ashley Lee.
Hello.
Welcome, Ashley. Ashley is a board certified registered nurse and quantum energy healer. She has the Global Energy Mastery School for adults, parents, and children. And she's developed tools and programs to support parents and adults and children in conflict resolution, zero pointing any conflict and allowing solutions in love to flow through. And she's a gifted, incredible healer speaker. She has a show called The Miracle Is You podcast, which we were on just a couple of weeks ago. And we're back on with Ashley on our show to continue the conversation. So, welcome. So glad to have you here, Ashley.
So glad to be here. So grateful for you both and the faces of the future that you bring forward every day in our world. Wow, what a platform and what an opportunity to live and grow inside of.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start off real quick and ask what exactly is zero pointing, for our audience, and how'd you get there? Maybe you can help us understand, like in this future we're headed towards, there's often new language, new concepts, new technologies. So for some of those people who aren't quite aware, what exactly is zero pointing, and what does that mean?
That's such a wonderful, beautiful question. When we look at conflicts, we look at one side and the other. So we could take this is my side and this is your side. And a lot of times these are opposite effects, opposite values, opposite perspectives, differences in the way we look at things and the way we value our experiences, our world. And so a lot of times when we're in conflict, we're kind of like this, right? And we're like, wait, my way is the best way and your way is wrong and I'm right and you're wrong. And so we kind of do this and we have this energy between our beings and our way of relating. I call this space the energetic relational space. So this is where we relate. And sometimes
that's
when
that
we
space
relate
in the middle.
Yes, that space in the middle.
For those who are tuning in audio.
For those that are tuning in audio, thank you. And that reference is between the two hands as an illustration of my viewpoint and your viewpoint, and where I am and my body is and I'm speaking and sharing, and then where your body is and speaking and sharing. We tend to relate with conflicts from time to time. And sometimes those conflicts are pretty severe and they're shooting lightning bolts back and forth. And those lightning bolts, our emotions of how we are charged by the experiences of our differences. And so what occurs is in our same body, our own body, what we do is we look at, here's my viewpoint and here's your viewpoint, and here's my resistance to your viewpoint, and here's your resistance to my viewpoint. And then we clash, right? Or we bash each other. And what happens is I'll start to take responsibility for my viewpoint and what's occurring. And when I do that, I go through a conflict resolution process. And I acknowledge that I've got a conflict over here. And I acknowledge that maybe I've got a conflict in here too. So it depends on my perspective of what the energy is that's in conflict and how we can actually come to a resolution. And how I do that is acknowledge that this energy between us is discordant or disruptive or distracting or not okay or wrong. And then I recognize, if I stay in this state with this other person or other perspective, I lose the opportunity to connect. I lose the opportunity to come together. I lose the opportunity to create a solution based in love. And then we start creating solutions. Well, how best can I control this? Or how best can they control this? And we go back and forth with trying to control and manipulate each other to win our viewpoint in the conversation. And a lot of times winning that viewpoint turns into a nullified environment. Like nothing really happens or blooms or blossoms inside the opportunity to go through the conflict and shift it. So the zero pointing part is really about me accepting that there's a conflict. And in that conflict, I then move into that second step, which is judgments. So I start clearing my own judgments about myself. I clear my judgments about what's going on over here and how I'm sending it over to the other person. And then what I do is I get clear in my being about what this is, what is the energy of it, what is the conflict, what is the emotion that's charged in the field. Then I start to release those consciously, creatively, and intentionally. And inside that intention, then I start to get clear in my awareness about what's really happening. I start to drop the ideas of manipulating or trying to control everything. And then I move into that softer, more compassionate, non judgmental space. When I do that, then I start to recognize this side over here and what's generating that. What are their self judgments that they might not know about themselves? So I start releasing that in me so that I can start having the clarity and they start to have the clarity inside themselves about what was causing the conflict. Then I start to release the judgments that they're flinging over towards me because I recognize that if I don't drop those judgments, I stay charged and defensive towards those judgments
Yeah.
coming up. So I start to zero point it. So the way that it actually physically zero points it is we have two opposing viewpoints or bipolar viewpoints. What I do is I start to collapse both of them and bring them together physically in the energy field. And that starts to zero point the energy. So now when we're faced with each other, that judgmental charged environment now is let go, move through. So in the third step, I bring in forgiveness and I call it the street cleaner. It cleans up the rubble that was left from the wall that blocked us from communicating or being with each other. And
Yeah.
I start to forgive myself for having judgments, for flinging judgments. Then I start to go over on this side and forgive this side for having self judgments on itself. And then the judgments that got slung over this way or towards me. And then step 4 is this easy step is I am complete. I am no compete, meaning I am done having this kind of energy that created this conflict, which were fear-based consciousness challenges, I call it. So they're thought forms that I derived or they derived or we derived together, and it impacted our ability to relate optimally. So I decided I'm not going to join into that pattern that I have with this person or this being or this business or anything that I look at, either individually or in a group. And then what I do is I say I'm complete with that. And it starts the completion process in the quantum energy field that we have relating with each other. And it starts diminishing that conflict so that we can actually get to some of the real value points that created the discord or the different perspectives. Then in the fifth stage, which is my favorite stage, is I get to illuminate and notice the light within me, that true giftedness that I have in me. And I start to illuminate that into this previous conflictual environment. And then I look over here at this other person or being or group, and I see the light within them. And then what happens is when I see the light within them and their giftedness within them, that starts to generate the listening and the speaking to start to cultivate a different way of relating than we had before.
Yeah.
So that's the
Yes.
zero pointing conflict resolution that I created.
What I'm hearing is when we have a conflict, where there's emotional opposition, there's charged emotions, heatedness in that moment. There's mental opposition. People have opposing viewpoints, different perspectives on a situation. My way is better than your way. Might be attached to their perceptions and ways that they're viewing things and their beliefs. And then what you're talking about is that third layer, is that energetic layer, is like what happens in the field actually when people are holding these two opposing viewpoints and this charged emotional energy. What actually happens in that field? There's disharmony. We're not consciously creating, we're just kind of battling it out. Clifton and I like to call it quantum field battling. It's like
There you go.
whose point of view is going to dominate the reality that we live in. I'm right, being attached to it, holding so much pride in that viewpoint that you have and wanting to convince the other person, right? I say this with so much clarity because we've done this many, many times, Clifton and I. And then you don't get to that transcendent third way, that win-win-win that's in the middle of like what's actually there for you both, that you can create from a place of harmony, from a place of awareness, self-awareness, and presence. Because if you're not aware of the viewpoints that we each have, then they're destructive of creating anything further that's constructive.
Absolutely. The presence is quintessential to accessing our own awareness and then the awareness of the field dynamics that are going on between people.
Wow, that's so beautiful. In our process, we have something called the 6 Ds of disentanglement, and the stages that you mentioned match it very
Oh,
well.
yeah.
And what you've done is you've kind of moved it beyond just a mental exercise and sort of brought in that quantum view of reality and the energies that we emit both externally and how we create them within our own beliefs and our own being, either consciously or unconsciously. And a lot of these concepts that you're talking about, we covered in previous episodes with Dr. Steven Schwartz, Dr. Vibe, and Jorge Patrono. So if you're just tuning in, some of these concepts might be a little foreign. Definitely check out those concepts because we go into a lot of those principles and how you can actually step into relating with a quantum view of reality. And just with that, Ashley, I'd love to hear how you came to this. Like, where did you start in your career? I know a lot of people right now are going through moments of conscious awakening, and they're starting to see that, hey, whether it's technology or global affairs or just their own consciousness, that where they've been isn't where the future is going to be. And maybe some of those beliefs and stories they've been telling themselves aren't proving to be true. They're awakening to some conflict either within themselves or within their business or just in leadership in general, where some of your 0 point methodologies can be super helpful. Can you share a bit about your journey, how you got to understand the 0 point methodology and perhaps where you started in all this?
That's such a wonderful question. And the starting point I sense is, I'm going to be really honest about all of this, is conception, right? And coming in, right?
I
To
was
the
going to say
physical.
lifelong.
It is a
We're going to
lifelong.
hear her whole life story now because she came into this world awakened.
Right. Well, yeah.
Let's go,
Someone
Ashley.
awakened. And then we kind of closed down to that awakenedness because we've separated our spirituality or our energetic sensitivities, right? We could call it maybe in the past psychic abilities or other kinds of abilities. I call it just general intuition. It's just feeling ultimately connected with everything. When we're little kids, we feel connected with the birds and we run around and fly like a bird, right? Walking around. And we climb trees because we feel one with the trees. And they tell us stuff. They tell us stories. They tell us wisdom. They share with us in ways that we don't normally function as adults. And then when we grow older, we got logical and linear and went kind of all left brain and went into mathematics and formulas and ways in which we strategize our success. Whereas when we're children, we're really connected to success already because we're breathing and living and moving and loving and hugging and doing all the things that seem very natural to us. But we didn't know how to value those ways of being when we were little. And we weren't expected to in society because we're not little kids running around earning an income and creating jobs and careers. And so in my world, what I didn't realize was my natural born giftedness of feeling spiritually or energetically connected to all that is. I didn't quite know how to phrase and to create those connections where it was observable and feelable by other people. And so I think a lot of that cut down because I wasn't here to be alone or be different. I was here to be connected and collaborative and didn't know how to structure that in what we could call our whole being, right? Physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, all combined, all in the same moment, accessing all the tools that we've created in our life. And that's where I really focus with energy mastery for kids, is to focus in those areas while they're growing up, all the way even from conception through gestation, even in utero, in the womb, we can experience our bodies being developed. We can remember and access those abilities, and we don't realize it. And we can start relating with our world that early. And I think that kind of moves away a lot of our grown up or adult hangups or challenges of what we consider real and unreal. And so when we
Mm-hmm.
start working in the realms of reality, we look at these different perspectives. And many times when we have different perspectives or different reality orientations, we tend to conflict with each other and we tend to rub each
Yeah.
other the wrong way because we say, no, this reality is the real reality and your reality is fantasy or delusional or
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And I share with people when we call children and other people delusional, we end up robbing them of their creativity. And
Yes.
so what I sense is what we can do instead of saying your reality is not my reality, it doesn't work, is say, okay, it's really cool that you mentioned this reality. How does this reality correspond with the reality we're working with right now? And that will invite kids and other grown-ups that are energetically sensitive into these conversations that then create a cohesive environment rather than this conflictual one. And
Mm.
so that's where I really started. And then when I recognized I was here to support or came in with my giftedness, my mission, vision, purpose, and passion was to work with children. And I knew that
Yeah.
right away. I thought that was inside of being a pediatrician. And then I decided that the physician model wasn't quite working to connect with the kid's whole being, that the nursing model was probably closer.
When you realized that, were you actually working in that field, or when did you make that realization?
I made that realization when I decided that in my day in the 80s that going to college was the thing to do. So I decided that going to medical school is something that I wanted to do and study genetics and other things from a pediatric perspective. And then I realized that I would spend all my time in a lab and not really with people. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to shift it into an environment and discovered preschool teaching on the way through college. And I loved
Mm.
working with the kids one on one and one on group and in many different modalities, especially in the 2-year-old, and had no early childhood education training and knew it innately. So that's kind of where,
Mhm.
when we're growing up, when we have these innate giftedness, I invite everyone to follow that and create that as part of your journey because that's where your heart is leading you to in your grown up careers and jobs and opportunities and becoming a quantumpreneur, right? In those areas. And
It didn't
so,
exist when I was young. When I was
right?
asked, "What do you wanna be when you grow up?" Well, that word came to me in meditation. It didn't exist when I was a child, but yeah, it's like lawyer, doctor, actress, interior designer, those kinds of things. A lot of the things that we do in today's day and age didn't exist back then. So I'm curious, Ashley, as you're sharing this, you came in with this giftedness, with this awareness, with this kind of clear purpose that you want to help children from a very early age. And it sounds like you've been connected to that. People call it a childlike sense of awe and wonder, but really it's just tapped into the creativity, more into the right brain, into the perception of the oneness of the universe that we live in with all beings. You're talking about children, but there's also animals and plants and everything around us. It's kind of a interconnectedness feeling. Were there any moments along your progression, like as you're going through school, when we were talking about getting stuck in that left brainness, that indoctrination, and we talked about this on your podcast, were there any moments like that along your journey, or were you kind of clear this whole way that this is actually not optimal for my development?
No, I was super unclear being born in the 60s and living through the 70s as a younger child, and then a young adult in the 80s, and then adulthood in the 90s, and then becoming pregnant and getting married and doing our adult activities. And really distracted by these decades of unfolding in our society that didn't really appreciate this interconnectedness and being energetically sensitive, being empathic
Mhm.
and feeling other people's feelings. So much so that I was a physical surrogate. I could feel when people were in pain. I could feel when people were hurt. I could know instantaneously what was going on with them because I was feeling it in my body. So this level of
Mhm.
empathetic transference was occurring that I didn't really even know was such a thing because we didn't have that languaging back then, that we have
Mhm.
now about energy sensitivities, the ways that we exchange energy, the ways that we can work with relationships and optimizing them. We used a lot of energy in our earlier years combating things and pushing things and forcing things and demanding and insisting and expecting things to occur rather than taking that moment, taking that breath, becoming silent and present in the moment. We were so worried about the past and how those past mistakes will impact our present and affect our future. And then we're so worried about the future that it's not coming into our present that we have to go in the future and reverse engineer it and then fix it and develop all these patterns in the mind of how to become successful. And we kind of forgot
Mm.
to be present, be in the flow, and work with one another. And we left this arena or this awareness that things can naturally self organize and that we didn't recognize that a lot of things are coming in for our benefit, not to mess us up. And so unraveling that all in an adult society world helps the children emancipate and liberate their true sense of being here and why we are what we are and what we're here to be and do and experience and have together. So that was sort of
Mm.
the inner impetus that kept driving. You could call it maybe your golden compass,
Mhm.
your true north, your inner guidance, I call it. We lose being connected to that aspect of ourselves. And I'm present in my adult world at age 60 now and I
Wow.
feel 40, and to bring that back into our whole reality and bring that forward with children and parents and practitioners or teachers to help children guide that and be driven through their inner guidance and their interconnectedness rather than all these formulaic ways we have derived success orientation. And because a lot of the success orientation, when we fail, we move into a punishment model and we punish ourselves and we force each other to have regret and remorse. And when we do that, especially when we do that with children and adults, when we feel regret or remorse, do we feel better or do we feel worse? We feel worse. And a lot of times it's at a lower frequency in the quantum field than it was from the mistake itself. So
Absolutely.
why would we lower ourselves even more to feel regretful, to feel sorry? When we're sorry, a lot of times we're not sorry because we don't understand what occurred. And so instead, sharing with people how to create interpersonal responsibility is far more
Mhm.
effective, far more deeper in developing confidence and learning from the past or learning from mistakes than punishing oneself and then trying to figure out how to get out of it, how to move through it, or abate it altogether. So in our grown up world, we call it risk mitigation. And that is all stemmed from fear. And then we create solutions inside of it, which causes us more and more entanglements of fear bases living in our adult world. And the children hate it. We all hated it when we were little, and we hate it now. And it's not very effective to create a community that everyone works together and everyone values ourselves and each other.
Wow. When you were talking about empathic transference, I think you said earlier, as a nurse, that was very challenging and a big part of my awakening moments years ago. Feeling other people's pain in your body and being tapped into what's going on, like when your patient's about to fall and you like get there just in time. I think that speaks to a lot of people in that field.
And we'll
Yes,
definitely
it does.
dive into that field and your experience as an RN, but wanted to also share that the fact pattern that you're talking about with parents and children is very evident in my experience and observation in the entrepreneurial world, because 90,
Mhm.
95% or more of startups fail. And how are we treating those entrepreneurs who took that initiative and took that risk? Oftentimes the joke is, I'll invest in your second project, not your first one, because we know you're going to make all these mistakes. But what happens when you make that mistake? Where is the supportive environment to pick people up, help them step into a greater sense of responsibility to create the next project or next idea? And that's really one of the areas where the Foundation for Human Potential really comes in, is to help those individuals who have tried and maybe not succeeded, but help them get back up on their feet and moving forward, because it removes, exactly as you said, sort of that feeling of shame and defeat, but elevates the vibration. And if entrepreneurs are the ones, or quantumpreneurs are the ones creating new ideas that'll help bring us to a better future, then they're the number one source of inspiration. And so bringing an elevated energy to them can be a huge force multiplier for the collective. And so just wanted to share that, yes, this happens with parents and children and schools. And it also happens in adulthood in terms of how we create commerce and industry and innovation.
It sure does. I was really looking into that, or being guided on the journey in that over the last 2 years, about developing teams and infrastructure.
Mhm.
And a lot of the savants, the creatives, the visionaries, the thought leaders want to do their creative work and don't want to run a business, or don't want to
Yeah.
finance the business, or don't want to deal with the CPA spreadsheets and all of that stuff. So, how then do you create a team around you that actually
Mhm.
sees and validates and supports you, rather than sets you up to fail, to say, okay, well, you're going to fail the first time around. You're going to fail because you don't have teams. You're going to fail because you don't know how to make deals. You're going to fail because you don't know how to run a CPA spreadsheet. You're going to fail because you're only focused on your craft and not on the whole business,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. And so, what if in Spirited, we're designed to do what we do best? So what I've met is these team members that are highly conscious, that are quantumpreneurs, and they're conscious financiers, they're conscious
Mhm.
landowners, they're conscious CPAs, and people who are putting the books together. I've met conscious lawyers making smart contracts and other opportunities. Like I share, is everybody wants an NDA, and I think it's funny because I'm telepathic, so I have the ability to experience people's thoughts, and I'm
Uh-huh.
not trying to, because when I was a little kid, I used to stick my fingers in my ears, saying, "Why do I have
Yeah.
to hear everybody's thoughts? I don't want to hear everybody's thoughts."
Mm.
And then my inner guidance, when I was a nurse and had a little baby on the bed and hooked up to life support, and I said, "Why do I have such extreme telepathy?" And my
Mhm.
inner guidance goes, "Well, how's the kid doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, the kid's fine. The vital signs are great. This is great. And the baby's sedated and on a ventilator and on life support." And then my inner guidance goes, "Yeah, how do you know?" And I'm like, "Because I can hear the baby." And then I became in my own awareness that I give words for those who can't speak yet. So they're either on life support and they have a breathing tube in their mouth when they're sedated, or they don't know how to speak yet, or they're young toddlers, or whatever. And I was realizing, wow, so telepathy is fairly useful to support
Mhm.
people in generating that kind of conversation, not to get in everybody's way. And so we
Yeah.
didn't realize that we have all of these gifts and these capacities that are designed to grow a process and bring forward to society what maybe hasn't been here before. So if we
Mhm.
don't know how to create it, we don't know how to value it, and we don't know how to value exchange it, even with the people who are to receive the product or the service we're here to create, right? And the infrastructure we're here to create now on the planet. And for me, I was like, okay, what does it take to bring everyone together on this team that optimizes each other doing their best and what they love to do? So I've met people that are
Yeah.
very wealthy that want to meet savants and creatives and develop these products and services. But you're right, they're kind of like, well, I want to see your first round first and all your failure points. And instead, what if the failure points is because they didn't have a conscious financier to mentor them in the realm of financiering that they
Mm.
do best to bring forward this product and service? So I'm not sure we have to fail everybody first, say, did you pay the hard knocks in life? I think we've been paying them all along. And so I invite everyone in their giftedness to learn how to start to come together. And that's where I recognize the conflict resolution process was really helpful, because if we all showed up knowing how to zero point our own conflicts that we're generating into the field of relating with each other, then these teams start to come together more effortlessly and more graciously, with compassion for each other, that I don't have to know everything about everything in order to be an entrepreneur. I
Mhm.
do need to know, though, what the conscious financier does, so that I'm able to guide the conscious financier in ways in which this will work, these products and
Yeah.
services.
That's why we call it a holistic transformation in our Quantumpreneur Academy, because in there they learn the skills of financial literacy with entrepreneurial skills, with tapping in and continuing to channel their giftedness, their creative spark that they tap into for whatever it is that they're here to birth, which is what we call their beingness-based business that arises as a natural byproduct of who you are. You still have to have that 360 awareness of what you're not. And the other
Yes,
things that are important, the other roles that complement your role to do what you'd like to do as a team in completing the mission.
right. So our executive boards and new business structures are starting to take on a new persona, right? A new genre of ways of relating that work less of a hierarchy, less about return on investment. And it's more about, we receive this giftedness inside of us and we share that with others. Then together as the group creating the business, we share the giftedness together to the marketplace. I call it the planet share instead of the market share. And we share
Mm.
that with everyone in humanity. And then they get to choose whether they'd like to interact with us. And what we do is we rise humanity rather than placing all the value on money and all the value on exchange in that way. And we start to grow in ways we haven't really seen before on the planet, which is exciting to endeavor inside of.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we do in our Quantumpreneur Academy is help build that base level of understanding of what creates a sustainable business. And one of those aspects is understanding the importance of financing as just a modality of energetic exchange, how much you're giving out versus how much you're taking. Because if you're creating a structure that a lot of these savants are creating for the future generations, there's an element of sustainability in that model. And just like we are in our agriculture, recognizing the importance of permaculture and regenerative farming practices, there's that same aspect in business practices where it's not about just creating a monocrop with the most mass so you can sell it for the most money, but it's about thinking about the iterations and cycles of those businesses. And one of the things that we help a lot of our clients with is that aspect of burnout, because they are working in an unbalanced KPI environment where they're looking for a specific return in a certain period of time. That is the similar model of, let's grow this corn as fast as possible, not recognizing, as you said, the interconnectedness of all things. And the same thing occurs with leadership, is you can crank down maybe with some extra anger to try to motivate your team to deliver certain objectives in a certain period of time, but over the course of a long period of time, you're depleting the nourishment of that topsoil that then creates that burnout and creates what we see in terms of toxic culture, especially in the startup environments, because of the pressures that are put forth by the financial mechanisms and instruments. And so this conscious finance is a really interesting topic that is pivotal for each individual to note, just as much as what you're talking about with interpersonal relationships and this zero point. And I'd love to bring that focus back to, how did you develop? Obviously, you were born with this interconnectedness. And so we like to say you kind of were awake through this process. And one of the patterns, that fact patterns we see, is then the challenge is, well, how do you package what you do and something that's so vast into something that's relatable, tangible, and understandable for individuals to engage with and really value. And I'd love to hear kind of your own journey as what we call quantumpreneur to get to where you are today with your offering.
It's a really great question. It guides me back to the moment when I was in an office working with kids coming out of being at the bedside and being in the hospital invasive critical care environments to keep people alive at all costs, and a very invasive model at this time. And we're growing in that model too, so that it's less invasive and less invasive. And so that's beautiful to see that unfold. And knowing that energy healing is here and it's been here all along, we just didn't know how to tap into it, especially in our first world civilizations. The indigenous environments definitely kept that alive and on the planet and moving through that. And then this sort of middle stage of medical or healthcare, wellness care was a nutraceutical work or a natural plant medicine instead of pharmaceutical, synthetically made molecules that change our body and its chemistry to bring it back to balance and health. And in this environment, as I started to grow and to heal from my own asthma and allergies from an energetic process that was a bit mechanical, designed ingeniously from a chiropractor, I freed myself of allergies and asthma from an energetic level that I had re-remembered inside of myself.
So interesting, because on our previous episode, we had Dr. Stephen Schwartz, who is a chiropractor, and he coded energy vials to help people overcome cat allergies and autoimmune diseases through frequency and whatnot. Could you share a little bit about what kind of process that was?
That was a process called advanced allergy therapeutics. And the chiropractor that designed that recognized that our bodies interface with digital information, so ones and zeros. And so what was created was a software program and a lead that led from the computer to the human body, sending electronic signatures to the body, making the body weak. And in that process, what had occurred was that the chiropractor realized that our autonomic nervous system was entangled energetically, magnetically, and electrically through these allergy molecules. And so tapping on the back in a special way helped access that pattern interrupt and interrupt the pattern of what was causing the body to be weak. They were starting to begin to realize that our consciousness was impacting our physical health. And so the way to untangle that conflict was to tap on the back, access the autonomic nervous system, and create the body being weak at the same time. So holding that vial, same thing, getting the digital signature sent to you. So everything in our physical atoms world is ones and zeros. And so we're scientists and others, physicists and other people are beginning to help everyone see that as true by developing diagnostics and other ways to illustrate so that it's not magic and woo-woo. It's actually real physics in real time about what's going on and how we interface with our bodies and create it being healthy. And so in that process, I had graduated myself out of the bedside nursing and moved into a chiropractor's office and saw kids and families in real time. And what I realized was I was helping the kids really energetically open up to the truth of themselves, to recognize that they're this whole being, that scientifically and spiritually, those were bridged and connected, not separate from each other. And so we've learned in Western medicine to segregate things. Oh, it's the brain. Oh, it's the lungs. Oh, it's the heart. It's this and that. And we forgot to reincorporate the whole body and the whole being. And then the whole being energetically in a mental, emotional, and spiritual realm. And so creating those environments in the office with the kids, they came out and said, now that I know the truth of myself, what do I do? And I said, I don't know. And they said, where do I go to school? And I said, I don't know. And they said, what other energy doctors can I see? And I said, well, I'm really a nurse, but it's okay. Right. And so they said, where do we eat? What do we eat? How do we do this? And I'm like, wow, I need a social worker now, like a social infrastructure to create conscious living for the kids. And I didn't know it unfolded in me naturally and organically rather than me planning it out or figuring it out. And the kids brought it forward and said, what do we do? So then I started a listing site and I started different websites to bring in people to recognize that they could start to become their whole being, expressing all of themselves, because that's what gets rid of depression, anxiety, conflict, confusion, overwhelm, burnout. That's what helps us when we unify our whole being rather than segregate. No, wait, I have to be logical and linear to figure out, my CPA spreadsheets. Well, that could be true, but what if we could also use our intuitive abilities, our emotional abilities? How do we feel about that? Are we asking for change? Are we asking for upgrades? Are we saying we need to reevaluate this? We can create environments that optimize our energy in ways that we stay healthy, happy, and well adjusted all throughout our lives. And so that really was where the impetus was to create this zero pointing technology, when I recognized parents were coming in and not hearing their children, not seeing their children, not feeling their children for what their giftedness was. And instead of sending kids to a career fair in high school about what it is we should grow up to be, we didn't realize that the children were sharing with us the whole time who they wanted to be and how they wanted to grow up. And we forgot that because we decided they have to go play soccer, or they have to learn piano, or they have to learn all these things in order to be masterful. But they were already born masterful. They get to experience life to bring out that mastery. And so that's what I'm cultivating now, is supporting energy mastery for kids, children, practitioners, parents, and our whole admin team to create a construct called Global Energy Mastery Schools.
Sounds like a very preventative measure rather than having a crisis in midlife. Like, what am I doing with my life? Who am I? You kind of experience and explore that early on when it's most ripe. In a child's mind, it's all creativity and play, and learning how to cultivate that with other life skills. Of course, you can't be all in that space the whole day, right?
Right.
So I think it's really beautiful what you're doing. And I know you said you're 60 years young, and it sounds like this really is like the culmination of everything you've worked on throughout your life, this Global Energy Mastery Schools.
Yes, thank you. And, I don't even feel 60, I feel 30. And it's just amazing to acclimate our genetics and our other aspects inside our body to reduce inflammation, swelling. And so for adults now, even though we may not have lived that way, many adults came in and saw me and said, I wish I knew you when I was 15. And I said, I think I wish I knew myself when I was 15 too. Like, I didn't know it either. Right. So it's okay that we feel like we never had that opportunity now that we're adults. However, we can always visit those opportunities when we were children and reframe them in our mind so they don't stay stuck as traumas or these PTSD moments, these post-traumatic stress moments that keep us locked into closed loop systems and behavior patterns that really don't free us into being this quantumpreneur. And I know I clicked and I departed a little bit from your question. And what I wanted to circle around was that when we realize who we really are inside and what we're really here to bring, now we look at developing other people in our environment who see us for who we are and see us for what we are and what's capable. And then in that side, everybody take their expertise, their giftedness, their ability, their experiences, and their nuances, their genres, and we bring our divine gifts and our cultivated experiential gifts in the physical world together to the table to actually make this business prosper, grow, become valued, have exchanges, grow capital so we can continue to grow. I think there was a big movement over the last 20 to 30 years that the way that we start up these kind of grassroots new entities on the planet was volunteerism. And I've noticed that that level of philanthropic presence and volunteerism works for a little while, but it's not sustainable long term. And so, what are some of those mechanisms of how we come together is what I'm questioning in my being in the universe about how to cultivate energetically those resources. You know, we've had great metaphysicians in our world that have been business people and creatives, and Buckminster Fuller talked about this, about processional energies, that when we open our mind, our hearts, our being to opportunities we haven't experienced before, and even looking in the future and it's not there, and looking in the past, it's not there, being in the present moment with other people, cultivating something brand new that we hadn't experienced before, like moving KPIs, key performance indicators, into something else. I think I had another podcast where I said it was something else on a quantum level. And I was like, that's really cool. So we can bring in all these energetic patterns when we walk forward with purpose, when we walk forward with clarity. And so I sense, instead of bashing each other and telling you're wrong and you're going to make mistakes, is okay, what are we clear about now? And then what are we clear about gaps that we have in building this business? That maybe we need another team member, or we need more focus groups, or we need something to cultivate and develop this further so that we can start to see these returns in such a way so that the company keeps growing. And that's where I was, and really focusing on your question about what brings us forward. You know, I agree with you. It is easy to cultivate. I'm a conscious financier, so I've made lots of money. But now the conscious financiers, though, don't know how to actually connect really well with the savants, because they're afraid the savants won't do anything, won't get anything done. Their head in the clouds. They don't ever write anything down, all this sort of stuff. And instead, okay, I need a copywriter to help this visionary get it written out. So I'm going to finance a copywriter. I know that this is needed. I know that that's needed. Let's bring it together. And then it'll end up cultivating a positive outcome, even if the first round is a failure. What if it doesn't have to be such a catastrophic failure where we have to go back into our emotional self and go back to emotional wisdom and go back to, we keep grinding ourselves down instead of lifting each other up. And I'd like to see that sort of develop in business team dynamics.
That's beautiful. And in our venture studio, that's exactly what we do. We bring people together whose beingness is very specialized and focused in a particular aspect. And as you said, the consciousness behind that is so critical in today's day and age. Is you can replace anything that's superficial with AI, so how do you get that deeply embodied conscious person whose full expression is in that subject matter expertise of, for example, being a copywriter, and to present that to that savant to be experienced by that individual. And you have a merging and a blending of the energies, where what we've observed is that the savant is instilling really unique information and knowledge that helps that copywriter, for example, transcend, get to the next level in some nonlinear way. And that copywriter is instilling those gifts and wisdom of the importance of copywriting, how to copyright, but in an embodied and practiced environment, not in book learning or here's a whiteboard, lecture format. And that doing as you move forward is such a beautiful, almost assembly line of how do you construct these kinds of futuristic businesses. And one of the things that I wanted to circle back on as well was there a pattern or a recognition of the types of people that come to you and resonate with your work on the parent level and practitioner level? Maybe it's not a demographic, or maybe it's a psychographic, or maybe it's an energetic resonance with a particular mission.
Yes, I sense a part of the question to answer is that around practitioners, I created a year-long mentoring course. And this year-long mentoring course is called Learn the Art of Your Own Energy Healing through Energy Mastery. And that energy mastery, I share with CEOs of real estate businesses. I share with chiropractors. I share with healers and other people and parents. And what that talks about is the ability to work on the energetic relating standpoint, not really what your innate craft is, bringing out your innate craft to the stage of relating and optimizing the relating so that you're able to deliver coherently to the participant, to the client, to the customer, that you're able to land the listening of your gift, of your craft, of your service, of your product. And so what I do is support people in recognizing that the energy of the relationship, so how you source the energy, how you send the energy, and then how the energy is received. You know, kind of in baseball, like getting that glove and catching that baseball. That's the process in which I support people, because I've recognized that if I utilize all of these practitioners throughout global energy mastery schools and they've learned their craft, but they haven't learned how to deliver their craft to a group of kids in a certain age group and to their corresponding parents that may not understand what any of these things are about. I support them in helping them recognize within themselves what that means and how to illustrate that, how to communicate that, how to set the speaking and the listening so that everyone's following the information, the wisdom back and forth, so that it's a shared collective and it then becomes super valuable for everyone to interact with. And so that's what I do. And then I have a second year program called Learn the Art of Your Own Energy Healing through Energy Mastery of Stewardship. So I share with people how, when you have the higher awareness, how do you steward the space so that everyone grows together rather than bashing and saying, I'm the leader, I'm in charge, you don't know what you're talking about, listen to me, I know what's right. Because that's what starts evolving those conflicts. So instead, what we do is when we have a higher awareness, because all the parents go, well, how come I'm here? And how come I have to learn this? And my husband or my wife won't learn it. And I'm like, because you're the one that's energy sensitive. And so you start the ball rolling, okay? But what we're really here to do is have everybody's energy sensitive. We just closed it down. And so what happened was we come in stewarding the space and really lifting everyone up, where we don't have to be the boss. We don't have to be the director. And we get to be responsible for our energy, how we source it, how we cultivate it, how we send it, how it's received, and how we get triggered or untriggered by it. And all of these aspects start to unfold in ease and grace and flow. And so that's what I've been focusing with over the last 10 years, because more adults kept coming into my office than the children did. It was like the children didn't need a lot of help. They did need to learn the languaging around their giftedness so they could start to express. But it was really the parents that weren't, and the practitioners that weren't able to see what the kids were bringing forward. And so that's where I spent a lot of my craft growing that, to develop languaging, nomenclature, vernacular wording, copy around these situations so that everyone could participate with that. And I tell you, it's a consistent, evolving way to be. Like, for example, last week I was in front of a 6-week-old. The little baby had thrush on her tongue. I held the back of her head and helped her with consciousness transfers, how to help herself clear the yeast or the thrush in her mouth and her digestive tract. I didn't do it for her. I did it with her, stewarding her consciousness to connect, and she's clearing it now. The 2-year-old sibling had telepathy and thought that everybody else had telepathy. So I asked the dad, I said, when you think negatively about your 2-year-old, please consider that your 2-year-old can hear you. And he's like, what? And then the 2-year-old got so excited about the telepathy that she started talking to another toddler that did not know telepathy. So I was sharing her telepathically how to share with the toddler how to talk to each other, because they were both rather nonverbal. And it was useful because they enjoyed their time together by sharing with each other in ways that were more innate for their pre-verbal states.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Ashley. Two things I want to say about what you just said. One is, the most important thing is to understand like your giftedness. But then the second most important thing after that is the people around you who love you, for them to see your giftedness. And that's why a lot of the work that Clifton and I do are bringing into a community setting, because that validation and that affirmation helps to create that momentum to continue pursuing that giftedness and to expand that capacity. And the other thing I want to say is I'm meeting more and more children that are becoming verbal later in life. Like they may call it developmentally delayed in Western culture or something like that, because there's certain milestones that your child is expected to hit. But because of that nonverbal communication, that telepathy, I think these children actually are coming in with greater giftedness, and they are communicating with us, and we all can tap into energy. Some of us may be a little closed off about it, but you can learn how to communicate with your child before they even verbally speak.
Yes. Yes, and I sense sometimes that the children are a little bit upset by our wording because our wording is negative. Our wording is me centric.
Mhm.
When we use our pronouns, I and we and me and you and all of this, we create separation in the field. And they know that that separation
Mhm.
really isn't true. So I invite grown-ups of all sorts working with children that may be late in their verbal acquisition and acquiring verbal skills, is ask themselves, ask the child, ask the relationship environment, what's happening here? And be silent and trying to figure it all out and make it my way or the highway. Go silent with your mind and let the environment share with you its wisdom. And that's that moment of presence, that's that moment of silence, so that we can actually hear what's happening. And you'll be amazed. Anyone can be amazed to doing this. And you start to receive awareness and information about how to work with it. And maybe the child's pissed off because all they hear is anger and irritation and conflict. And there's this. I would admit I lived in I called it a negatively charged environment, right? It was the 60s and it was this and it was that and all of that. And we can sit here and when we take away the blame and the shame and the complaining about it, it is negatively charged because it's all emotions and everybody's reacting and everybody's pissed off and nobody understands what anyone else is doing. And so when we are that way, how can we presence ourselves to quiet the mind, quiet our bodies, and start to really listen to each other on the inner? Because that's what the kids I sense are wanting to share and saying that we
Mhm.
can speak with each other without talking out loud.
Yeah. I'm learning more and more about telepathy and all of that. I mean, I've had this giftedness as well, thought other people had it. And with people, it's always been strong, but now I'm really getting into communicating with animals as well. And, through my recent awakening experience of our cat leaving, understanding how to do interspecies communication has become really interesting to me as well, for honing those gifts, because a little harder to get affirmation from a cat or a dog if you got it right,
Right.
what they're trying to communicate to you, than a child who may be like, "Yeah."
And even the plants, I work with the plants too and other things and the weather, like, it being hot out or it being cold out or anything. And I listen like to the plants. When do you like to be watered? And there, I don't know, one area in Hawaii was 4 p.m. I'm like, great. That's when the weather comes in and the clouds hit the mountains and then it rains. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So you're in coherence with the weather and the weather's in coherence
Yeah.
with the trees. And so they feed each other and
Mhm.
they support each other symbiotically rather than being threatened by their own survival. So they're in congruence with each
Mm.
other. And then you start to notice, wow, if the trees and the weather can be in congruence with each other, we can too. So, how do we
Mhm.
cultivate that? Our timing, our sequencing,
Yeah.
our voices, our conversation. How do we start to create that in such a collaborative environment where we work effortlessly without going, okay, my schedule is 1 p.m. Can you make 1 p.m.? No, I can't make 1 p.m. Okay, 3 p.m. Okay. We do all that back and forth. And then we wonder where our day went. And it was scheduling. But if we just tuned in and we go, okay, I would like to have a phone call with you. Are you available on Tuesday at 1 p.m.? No, I'm not. I hear that in my inner. And I'm like, okay, good. What date would be? Oh, Wednesdays is better. Okay, great. How about 4 p.m.? And so I kind of already have a general area of where to connect on the phone call. And then he goes, yeah, 4 p.m. on Wednesday works for me. And I'm like, woohoo. So we didn't have to spend all this time texting each other back and forth, wasting that valuable time, right, of running our business, for example.
And as a fail-safe, there's also technology which can schedule that part for us.
There's that too.
Clifton will look at your app and see when you're available and schedule, or vice versa.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know, we could be diving into this for hours, and I just wanted to sort of bring it home for listeners, especially if they're new parents. Mention some really important things that some might not realize is that children might be or are telepathic. And so even if you're not saying something to your child, they might be picking up on it. And the quantum perspective, you're emitting whatever emotional state you are at. Even if you don't direct it towards a child or say something, they're still feeling that. And you know, that was something that I grew up with was empathic space. I could feel the negative charge environment, although there was nothing necessarily directed towards me. I could just feel it. And what would your advice be to some of these parents who might not necessarily be so connected to their own abilities to be telepathic or energetically sensitive? How do you help them, or what would you say to them about raising children?
I share to parents that may have lived in an environment that was rather close to our inspirited way of being, that were very logical, linear, and had to get things done in a certain way, in a pattern, that I support everyone allowing the moment of stillness, of presence, and really, really dropping into listening, not listening to what we want to hear, not listening to thinking about what we need to say, but actually just quieting the whole entire mind, the whole body, and being present to what the space or the person, the child, is saying or sharing. And either out loud with a voice or non-verbally with, body movements, but then also energetically. And just say, energetically, what is this child wanting to share with me? I can only imagine that most children today, right now on the planet, are saying, please listen to me. And they could be nonverbal, they could be newborn infants. Please listen to me. And so then sharing that way, and okay, great. You said listen to you. Okay, what would you like to share? And then ask the question, even on the inner, out into the field to the infant. What would you like to share? I really hate diaper changes. Okay, great. Now I got it. Now you're upset about diaper changes. Okay. So then the baby and or the person is problem solving with the other person with an open ear, a compassion, an open heart to maybe looking at things differently. And maybe they take less time, less effort, less money, less interaction than we thought. Because maybe the other person has guidance that the other person not listening wasn't hearing or made available for the operational relating to occur optimally. That's one way that I help it. When parents start to do that, or other people working with children start to do that, they start to then stop and listen in their adult environments. They start to listen that they're telling themselves, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. Okay, if you say that to yourself all day long, how's that working out? You're not doing it, right? And so we don't even recognize or listen to our own self-talk. We don't listen to our talk we share with other people, either energetically or out loud. And what allows that to happen is increased awareness, and it allows us to have access to our subconscious and our unconscious mind, thoughts and feelings, so that we can start to reframe them easily. We don't have to go through 40 years of therapy in order to access this. And we can start to shift and change in real time, radically, rapidly, without having all of this frenetic environment that I have to change. I have to change for them. I have to change for everyone else. I'm terrible. I'm bad. It's not that at all. We just all forgot and really forgot to learn how to be present in our silence to hear the external world interacting with us. And then when we get better at that, we start hearing our internal world and how that's impacting us as well.
Wow, that's beautiful. And if our listeners are resonating deeply with your message and they want to step into being that better parent and understanding for themselves, not just in their role as a parent, but
The greatest way is my private practice through Ashley, ASHLEY, Lee, LEE, Healing, HEALING.com. And there I have an array of services to support parents, to support children, to support practitioners, and then also team build in these areas. I invite people everywhere they go when they're a quantumpreneur to create mentors in your life, like the foundation that you all have created, like the business growth and development that you all have created, to optimize that energetic relating so that our services and products do come out successfully well with our audiences that we're here to share our giftedness with.
wow.
Beautiful. And you mentioned also before we hopped on that if they want to learn more about what your work is, you can book a discovery call with you as well. So that's through your website?
Yes, that's through my website in the navigation bar called Book Now. And you'll go to a scheduler where you can fill in your discovery phone session with me. I would love to speak with everyone who enjoys this conversation, this opportunity, in gathering your giftedness and expressing it really well in the world.
So you do use an automated scheduler, not just intuitive scheduling.
It's not just, I do use an automated scheduler, yes.
And
So
you know,
it dings me on the phone and email.
and as this is called the startup of human potential, Ashley, we wanted to ask you, what does human potential mean to you?
Human potential means to me the opportunity to be a whole being, not this fragmented person throughout our day. That we get to implement our logical, linear, time constructed tools with our intuitive, emotional, connected beingness, dropping into the heart, dropping into our whole being, really being present, whole, healthy, balanced, and ready to celebrate life with ourselves and each other and the environments we choose to create. That's what I see as human
Wow.
potential.
Beautiful. Well said. I love the uniqueness of everyone's answer when we ask that question. I guess it's the one consistent question we ask from show to show. And it's been such a pleasure and an honor having this conversation with you, Ashley.
Thank you.
And really excited for the gift and the mission you bring to the world, helping children, helping parents connect with their children, understand unique giftedness and collaboration and harmony among teams. So whether it's for a child, a parent, an adult, your work is really absolutely valuable in this new paradigm world that we're all shifting into. So thank you for shining your light, being yourself, and thank you for tuning in to all of our listeners. We enjoyed having you with us in this conversation.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll talk to you all next time.